The massive alien ships appeared in Earth's sky like dark metal mountains floating among the stars. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the small blue planet below. His 6 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched the world spin slowly in space. Another easy conquest, his second-in-command reported, clicking his claws against the metal console. These humans have primitive weapons. Their strongest chips are made of simple steel and can barely leave their atmosphere. Veltar's mouth curved into what his species considered a smile. Perfect. How many worlds have we conquered now? 847, Commander. This will be 848. The alien fleet was enormous. 50 massive warships hung in space above Earth, each one larger than the biggest human city. Their hulls were made of metals that humans had never seen before, and their weapons could destroy entire continents with a single blast. The Zephyrians had used the same strategy for centuries. Arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and harvest the planet's resources. Down on Earth, in a hidden facility beneath the city of Seoul, Director Kim Dae watched the alien fleet through his monitoring screens. He was a thin man with graying hair and calm eyes that missed nothing. Around him, dozens of technicians worked quietly at their computers, their faces showing no fear. "They're positioning themselves exactly as we predicted," reported Lee Han, his communications officer. Lee Han was young but experienced, having trained his entire life for this moment. Kim Dae nodded slowly. "Send them our standard diplomatic response. Tell them we're honored by their visit and want to discuss terms peacefully." "Should I activate our hidden systems?" Lee Han asked. "Not yet," Kim Dae replied. "Let them talk first. We need to learn everything we can about them." High above Earth, the Zephyrian fleet began broadcasting their message. The same words they had used on hundreds of other worlds echoed across every human radio and television station. "People of Earth," Commander Veltar's voice boomed through the speakers. "We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 847 worlds across the galaxy. Your primitive weapons cannot harm us. Your simple ships cannot escape us. You have 72 hours to surrender completely, or we will destroy every city on your planet." In cities around the world, humans stopped what they were doing to listen to the alien message. Some panicked and ran through the streets. Others gathered in groups pointing up at the dark shapes in the sky. But in certain hidden locations, groups of people simply smiled and continued their work. What the Zephyrians did not know was that Earth had been preparing for this day for over 200 years. Commander Veltar studied the reports from his scanning teams. "Their technology is laughably outdated," his science officer reported. "They use chemical rockets to reach space. Their weapons are still based on explosive projectiles. Their communication systems use primitive radio waves." "Any signs of resistance?" Veltar asked. "None, Commander. Several of their governments are already sending diplomatic messages requesting peaceful negotiations." Veltar clicked his claws together in amusement. "They always do this. First they try to negotiate, then they realize it's hopeless, then they surrender. We'll have their resources loading onto our cargo ships within a week." But something felt different about these humans. Unlike other species the Zephyrians had encountered, the humans seemed genuinely curious about their conquerors. Instead of begging for mercy or making threats, they asked questions. "We would be honored to learn about your great empire," came the human diplomatic messages. "Could you tell us about your history? How did you manage to conquer so many worlds? Your coordination across such vast distances must be incredible." The Zephyrian officers found these questions flattering. They enjoyed talking about their victories and their superior technology. What harm could there be in boasting to primitives who would soon be their slaves? In the Seoul facility, Kim Dae listened to every word the alien said. Each piece of information was immediately sent to analysis centers around the world where teams of experts studied Zephyrian technology, tactics, and weaknesses. "They're telling us about their supply lines," reported Dr. Yoon Hai from the Technical Analysis Center. "Automated supply depots every 50 light years, all connected through quantum communication networks." "And their military deployment patterns?" Kim Dae asked. "They rotate their fleets every 90 days. They have reinforcement squadrons at strategic points throughout their territory. Kim Day smiled grimly. This was exactly the kind of information Earth had been waiting centuries to obtain. The Zephyrians had made the same mistake that had led to the downfall of every tyrant in history. They had become arrogant. They believed their own propaganda about their invincibility. They thought that because they had never lost a battle, they never could lose. But they had never faced humanity before. As the first day of negotiations ended, Commander Veltar felt confident that Earth would surrender just like all the others. His species had perfected the art of conquest through overwhelming force and intimidation. What he didn't realize was that while the Zephyrians had been perfecting conquest, humanity had been perfecting something far more dangerous: the art of patience, preparation, and perfect memory. The trap was already closing, and the Zephyrians didn't even know it yet. The small human shuttle moved slowly toward the massive Zephyrian flagship. It looked like a tiny insect approaching a giant metal beast. Ambassador Park Soo-jin sat calmly in the passenger seat, checking her notes one last time. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile that hid a sharp intelligence. "Remember the plan," she whispered into her hidden recording device. "Act impressed by everything they show us. Ask lots of questions. Make them feel important." The shuttle docked with the alien ship with a soft bump. Park Soo-jin and her small team of diplomats stepped into the Zephyrian vessel, looking around with wide eyes full of wonder. The alien corridors were huge and dark, with strange symbols glowing on the walls. Commander Veltar met them in the main conference room. He was tall and intimidating, with 6 arms and skin that looked like gray metal. His eyes studied the humans like a scientist examining insects. "Welcome aboard the Dominion's Edge," he said in perfect English. "I trust you understand why you are here." Park Soo-jin bowed politely. "We are deeply honored by your presence, Commander. Your empire must be incredibly advanced to travel such vast distances." Veltar's chest swelled with pride. "Indeed. We have mastered technologies your species cannot even imagine." "Please tell us about your great achievements," Park Soo-jin said, leaning forward with fascination. "How did you manage to build such a magnificent empire?" For the next several hours, Veltar boasted about Zephyrian conquests. He showed them holographic maps of the galaxy, pointing out each world they had conquered. He explained their military tactics, their advanced weapons, their perfect coordination across hundreds of star systems. "Your logistics must be amazing," Park Soo-jin marveled. "How do you supply your fleets across such enormous distances?" "We have automated supply stations throughout our territory," Veltar explained proudly. "Every 50 light-years there is a depot with fuel, ammunition, and spare parts, all connected through quantum communication arrays that transmit information instantly across any distance." "Fascinating," breathed another human diplomat, Nam-ki. "And how do you coordinate your military forces?" "Each sector has its own fleet that rotates every 90 days, Veltar continued. "We maintain reserve forces at key strategic points. When one world falls, reinforcements can arrive within hours." Back on Earth, every word was being transmitted through hidden communication devices sewn into the diplomat's clothing. In the Busan Intelligence Center, Colonel Choi Min watched data streams flowing across dozens of computer screens. "They're telling us everything," he reported to Director Kim Day. "Fleet positions, supply schedules, communication frequencies. Their arrogance is making them careless." Kim Day studied the incoming information with satisfaction. 200 years of watching and waiting, and now they're handing us the keys to their empire. The human diplomats continued asking innocent questions that seemed to come from simple curiosity. How many ships did each fleet contain? What were the coordinates of their supply depots? How did their communication systems work? Which worlds had the strongest defenses? Veltar answered every question eagerly. He enjoyed showing off Zephyrian superiority to these primitive creatures. He even showed them detailed maps of conquered worlds explaining how each battle had been won. "The key to our success," he explained, "is that we study each species carefully before we attack. We learn their weaknesses, their fears, their technological limitations. By the time we arrive, we already know exactly how to defeat them." Drenki. Sujin nodded admiringly. Such wisdom. You must keep detailed records of each conquest. Of course, Veltar said. The Imperial Archives contain complete data on every world we have brought under our control. Battle reports, technological assessments, cultural studies. We never forget what we have learned. What Veltar did not know was that humanity had been keeping their own records for much longer. Since the first Zephyrian conquest within range of Earth's deep space sensors, human scientists had been watching, learning, and preparing. In the Daegu Technical Analysis Center, Dr. Yoon Hai worked with teams of specialists to decode Zephyrian technology. Their quantum communication system uses a rotating encryption key, she reported, but the base algorithm is 70 years old and has known vulnerabilities. What about their supply network? Asked Kim Dae over the secure channel. We now have precise coordinates for over 800 automated supply depots. Their locations follow a predictable pattern based on fuel efficiency and strategic placement. On the Zephyrian flagship, the negotiations continued for 3 days. The humans seemed genuinely interested in learning about their soon-to-be conquerors. They asked about Zephyrian culture, history, and technology with the enthusiasm of students meeting their teacher. Your people must be very proud of such achievements, Park Soo-jin said on the final day. To build an empire spanning so many worlds requires incredible skill and planning. Indeed, Veltar agreed. We are the most advanced species in the galaxy. No one has ever successfully resisted us. I'm sure that's true, Park Soo-jin replied with a gentle smile that never reached her eyes. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, Veltar felt confident that the conquest was proceeding perfectly. The humans were clearly impressed by Zephyrian power and would recommend surrender to their leaders. But in the shuttle flying back to Earth, Park Soo-jin spoke quietly into her communicator. Phase 2 complete. We have everything we need. Begin. Phase 3. The trap was set and the Zephyrians had built it themselves with their own arrogance and loose tongues. 3 days after the human diplomats returned to Earth, strange things began happening across the Zephyrian Empire. On the distant mining world of Kepler 442, automated digging machines suddenly stopped working. The massive extractors that had pulled minerals from the planet's core for 50 years went silent without warning. Commander Veltar received the first report while eating his morning meal aboard the flagship. His communications officer, a nervous creature named Ziktar, approached with a worried expression. Sir, we're getting unusual reports from Sector 7, Ziktar said. The mining operations on Kepler 442 have experienced total system failure. Veltar barely looked up from his food. Equipment breaks down sometimes, send a repair team. Yes, sir, but the failure seems to have affected every piece of machinery on the planet simultaneously. Coincidence, Veltar said with a wave of his hand. That conquest was over 50 years ago. Old equipment fails. But the reports kept coming. By the end of the day, 6 more worlds had experienced similar problems. Industrial facilities shut down, communication arrays went offline, and defense systems malfunctioned. Each incident seemed random and unconnected. On Earth, Park Soo-jin continued her daily meetings with the Zephyrian commander. She maintained her role as the curious diplomat, asking innocent questions that seemed to come from simple fascination. Your empire has grown so quickly, she said during their 4th meeting. You must have excellent record-keeping to manage so many worlds. Veltar nodded proudly. The Imperial Archives contain detailed information about every conquest. We document everything: military strategies, technological capabilities, cultural weaknesses. How thorough, Park Soo-jin replied. Do you keep information about each world's defensive capabilities? Naturally. We analyze every world's strengths and weaknesses before we attack. It's why we never lose. Park Soo-jin smiled sweetly. Such wisdom comes from experience. Your first conquest must have taught you valuable lessons. Indeed. Our earliest victories showed us the importance of understanding our enemies completely. What Veltar did not realize was that humanity had been understanding the Zephyrians for much longer. Every piece of information he shared was immediately transmitted to Earth's analysis centers, where teams of experts used it to coordinate strikes across the galaxy. In the Seoul Command Center, Director Kim Dae watched holographic displays showing the systematic dismantling of Zephyrian infrastructure. Each target had been carefully chosen based on intelligence gathered over 2 centuries of patient observation. Status report, he requested. Colonel Choi Min consulted his data screens. 47 supply depots are now offline. Their quantum communication network is experiencing cascading failures. Military installations on 38 worlds report equipment malfunctions. And they still don't suspect us? No, sir. Each incident appears to be an isolated system failure. They're treating them as routine maintenance problems. Dr. Yoon Hai joined the conversation from her technical center. The beauty of their automated systems is that they all use the same base programming. Once we cracked their quantum encryption, we could access any network device in their empire. Kim Dae nodded with satisfaction. 200 years of watching and learning. Every battle they fought, every conquest they made, we were taking notes. The Zephyrian Empire had always relied on overwhelming technological superiority. Their automated systems were incredibly advanced but had one fatal weakness. They were all connected through the same quantum network. What the Zephyrians saw as an advantage, humanity had turned into their greatest vulnerability. On the mining world of Proxima 7, massive ore processors suddenly began operating at maximum capacity, burning through their power systems in hours instead of months. On the agricultural colonies in the Vega system, irrigation networks pumped millions of gallons of water into empty space. Defense satellites around conquered worlds turned their weapons toward empty patches of space and fired continuously until their ammunition was exhausted. Each malfunction was carefully designed to look like random equipment failure, while systematically destroying the infrastructure the Zephyrian Empire needed to survive. Back on the flagship, Veltar was beginning to feel concerned. The isolated incidents were becoming too frequent to ignore. Sir, Siktar reported nervously, we now have confirmed equipment failures on over 100 worlds. Our technical teams cannot find any common cause. Could it be sabotage? Veltar asked. From whom, sir? The conquered species lack the technology to interfere with our quantum networks, and the failures are happening simultaneously across thousands of light years. Veltar studied the tactical displays showing his empire. Red warning lights indicated problems on world after world. Supply lines were failing, communication networks were unreliable, and military installations were reporting critical shortages. What about interference from another spacefaring empire? He suggested. No, sir. This level of coordination and detailed knowledge of our systems would require decades of study. No enemy we've encountered has ever shown such capability. During their next meeting, Park Soo-jin continued her innocent questioning. Your coordination across such vast distances is remarkable. How do you maintain communication with worlds so far apart? Quantum entanglement communication, Veltar explained absently, his mind still troubled by the growing reports of system failures. Instantaneous transmission across any distance. And all your worlds use the same communication protocols? Yes, for efficiency and security, Park Soo-jin nodded thoughtfully. Standardization must make management much easier. What she didn't say was that standardization also made everything much easier to destroy once you understood the system. Humanity had spent 2 centuries studying Zephyrian quantum communications, and now they were using that knowledge to turn the Empire's greatest strength into its final weakness. The patient hunters had learned everything they needed to know, and now the real hunt was beginning. On the industrial world of Altair 5, massive factories that had produced weapons for the Zephyrian military suddenly turned their robotic arms against their own machinery. Metal twisted and sparked as automated systems destroyed themselves with mechanical precision. Within hours, 50 years of military production capability was reduced to smoking rubble. Commander Veltar stood frozen on his bridge as reports flooded in from across his empire. His tactical displays showed red warning lights appearing faster than his officers could count them. Sir, we're receiving emergency signals from the Vega sector, reported his communications officer, voice shaking. All supply depots have gone offline simultaneously. The Centauri defense grid is firing on empty space, another officer called out. They've exhausted their entire ammunition supply in 30 minutes. Proxima Station reports their fuel processors are dumping refined fuel into space instead of storage tanks. Veltar's 6 eyes darted between the displays showing his empire falling apart in real time. How is this possible? These systems have multiple fail-safes. His chief technical officer, Zurkon, worked frantically at his console. Sweat dripped from his gray skin as he tried to make sense of the data streams. Sir, the intrusion programs are like nothing in our databases. They're exploiting vulnerabilities in our quantum communication network that we didn't know existed. Could another empire be attacking us? No, sir. This requires intimate knowledge of our systems built up over many years. Whoever is doing this has been studying us for decades. On Earth, Director Kim Dae watched the operation unfold from the Central Command Center in Seoul. Holographic displays showed the systematic destruction of Zephyrian infrastructure across hundreds of worlds. Each attack had been precisely planned and perfectly timed. Phase 4 is proceeding on schedule, reported Colonel Choi Min. Their supply network is now 75% disabled. Fleet status? Kim Dae asked. Half their sector fleets are stranded without fuel. The others are receiving false orders that are scattering them across empty space. Dr. Yoon Hae's voice came through the communication system from her technical center. Their quantum network is completely compromised. We're redirecting their military communications to our own servers. They're basically talking to themselves now. Kim Dae activated his direct communication link to the Zephyrian flagship. Commander Veltar, this is Director Kim Dae of Earth Defense Coordination. I believe it's time we had an honest conversation. On the alien bridge, every officer turned to stare at their commander. The voice speaking perfect Zephyrian came from their own communication systems, but it belonged to one of the primitive humans they had been negotiating with. Veltar's mandibles trembled as the terrible truth began to dawn on him. You're doing this. We are, Kim Dae confirmed calmly. Every question your people answered, every detail about your empire that you shared so proudly, has been used to plan this moment. Impossible, Veltar whispered. You don't have the technology. You're right, we don't have your technology. We have something better, patience and perfect memory. On the main display screen, Kim Dae's face appeared. Behind him, holographic representations of hundreds of worlds glowed in the darkness. Each one represented a Zephyrian conquest, and each one was now displaying data that the aliens had never intended to share. We detected your first conquest over 200 years ago, Kim Dae explained. The Kepler 442 system. Our deep space sensors picked up the gravitational waves from your weapons. From that moment, we began watching and learning. Veltar sank into his command chair as the scope of the deception became clear. You've been spying on us for 2 centuries. Learning from you, Kim Dae corrected. Every battle you fought, every world you conquered, every piece of technology you used, we recorded it all. While you were building bigger weapons, we were building better sensors. Park Soo-jin's face appeared beside Kim Dae on the screen. All those questions I asked during our negotiations, we already knew most of the answers. We just needed confirmation and a few final details. The supply depot coordinates you shared so generously, Colonel Choi Min added, allowed us to target your logistics network with perfect precision. Veltar looked at his tactical displays with new understanding. The red warning lights weren't random equipment failures. They were targeted strikes against every critical system in his empire. And the humans had done it all without firing a single shot. Your automated systems are very impressive, Dr. Yoon Hae's voice explained. But they all use the same quantum communication protocols. Once we cracked your encryption, which took us about 60 years, we could control any networked device in your territory. While you were conquering worlds through brute force, Kim Dae continued, we were conquering knowledge through patience. Every species you defeated taught us something new about your weaknesses. On worlds throughout the Zephyrian Empire, automated systems continued their programmed destruction. Military bases found their weapons turning against their own installations. Transport ships received navigation data that sent them into asteroid fields. Communication arrays broadcast the locations of every Zephyrian military asset to the enslaved. Populations below. Your empire is finished, Kim Day stated simply. Your supply lines are cut, your communications are compromised, and your fleets are scattered. But we're not here for conquest, Commander. We're here for justice. Veltar stared at the human faces on his screen, finally understanding that he had never been the hunter in this scenario. From the moment the Zephyrian fleet had arrived at Earth, they had been walking into a trap 2 centuries in the making. The prey had become the predator, and the perfect trap was now closing around them. The Zephyrian fleet hung helplessly in Earth's solar system like caged animals. Commander, Veltar pressed buttons on his control panel frantically, but nothing happened. Their faster-than-light engines remained dead and silent. Why won't they work? He demanded from his chief engineer. Sir, there's some kind of interference field surrounding the entire solar system, Zurkon reported, his voice filled with fear. Our hyperspace drives cannot engage. Veltar looked out at the stars, realizing they were trapped. Unknown to the Zephyrians, humanity had spent decades quietly placing quantum interference generators throughout their solar system. The invisible cage had been waiting for this moment. On the main communication screen, Director Kim Day's calm face appeared. Behind him, holographic images of 847 conquered worlds glowed softly in the darkness. Each light represented a world that had suffered under Zephyrian rule. Your empire is finished, Commander, Kim Day said quietly. Your supply lines are destroyed, your communications are under our control, and your fleets are scattered across the galaxy without fuel or direction. Veltar's 6 arms shook with rage and fear. What do you want from us? The same thing we've wanted for 200 years, Kim Day replied. Justice for every world you've destroyed and freedom for every species you've enslaved. Dr. Yoon Hai appeared on the screen beside Kim Day. We've already begun transmitting detailed liberation instructions to all your former colonies. They now know exactly how to disable your occupation forces and reclaim their worlds. Every weakness in your technology, every vulnerability in your systems, Park Soo-jin added, is being shared freely with every enslaved population in your territory. Veltar watched his tactical displays in horror. Across the galaxy, rebellions were erupting, simultaneously on conquered worlds. The enslaved species were using Zephyrian technology against their oppressors, armed with detailed knowledge of how to defeat every weapon and bypass every defense. On the mining world of Kepler 442, human descendants who had been enslaved for generations used the technical manuals Earth had transmitted to turn mining equipment into weapons. The Zephyrian garrison found their own defensive systems working against them. On the agricultural colonies of Vega 7, farmers who had labored under alien rule for decades suddenly knew exactly how to disable the orbital control stations that kept them imprisoned. Within hours, they had seized control of their own world. Throughout the Empire, the same scene played out on world after world. Species that had seemed completely defeated were rising up with perfect coordination, each one receiving the knowledge they needed to overcome their specific oppressors. How did you coordinate all of this? Veltar asked, his voice barely a whisper. Colonel Choi Min joined the conversation from his command center. While you were building conquest fleets, we were building the most advanced communication network in the galaxy. Quantum entanglement transmitters, gravitational wave detectors, dark matter sensor arrays. We turned space itself into our messaging system. Every battle you fought, every world you conquered, Kim Day explained. We were there, watching and recording. We saw how you defeated each species, and we learned how they could defeat you. Veltar's communications officer suddenly called out in panic. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from our own garrison commanders. They're asking for safe passage off the worlds they're supposed to be occupying. The Proxima Sector fleet is requesting emergency evacuation, another officer reported. The local population has seized control of the orbital defense platforms. Centauri Base reports they're surrounded by former slaves using our own weapons against us. The reports kept coming. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, which had never lost a single battle, was collapsing everywhere at once. Not through superior firepower, but through superior knowledge. Humanity's gift isn't conquest, Commander, Kimday said, his voice gentle but firm. Our gift is memory. We remember every injustice, record every crime, and ensure that eventually, justice finds every tyrant. Park Soo-jin leaned forward on the screen. For 2 centuries, we've been the galaxy's memory keepers. While you forgot the suffering you caused, we remembered every victim. While you moved on to new conquests, we were preparing justice for old ones. Veltar looked around his bridge at his defeated officers. Their empire of 847 worlds was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The humans had turned their greatest strength, their perfect coordination and advanced technology, into their final weakness. What happens to us now? He asked. You have a choice, Kimday replied. Surrender unconditionally and face trial before a galactic tribunal of your victims, or be destroyed here and now. The choice was not really a choice at all. Veltar's weapons were useless against Earth's defenses. His engines wouldn't work, and his empire no longer existed to support him. We surrender, he said quietly. Across the galaxy, the last signals from Zephyrian command centers went silent. 847 worlds that had lived under tyranny for generations were finally free. And at the center of it all, Earth stood not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. In the Seoul Command Center, Kimday received messages from hundreds of newly freed worlds requesting alliance with Earth. But humanity's response was the same to all of them. They offered partnership, not rule. The galaxy had learned that there truly was nowhere to run when Earth remembered everything. Justice had found the Zephyrian Empire at last, delivered not through violence but through patience, memory, and the unwavering determination to ensure that no evil deed would ever be forgotten. The age of Zephyrian tyranny was over, and the age of galactic freedom had begun.